Welcome to the Mindfully Masculine Podcast. This is Charles. All right, so this will be our final episode discussing The 5 Love Languages for Men by Gary Chapman. And in it, we will go over the last chapter, which includes frequently asked questions. And specifically, we'll get into the topics of our final thoughts, challenges in identifying love languages, communicating love languages in relationships, the impact of miscommunication, gender differences in love languages, consistency in relationships, handling relationship challenges, long-term love and infidelity, and practical applications and personal reflections. Please like, subscribe, follow our podcast in your chosen app, and also check out our full episodes with audio and video that are available on YouTube. Thanks and enjoy.
Good afternoon, Charles.
Good afternoon, Dan. Yeah, we're recording this just after noon on Friday the 12th of July. We've got one final chapter left to cover in 5 Love Languages. The thing I like most about this book is how long it took us to go through it. It's not one of those things where we've been stuck on it for the last 5 months.
No, but also the content has been better than some of the other.
Yeah,
Than the previous, than the one we just went through.
Self-Care for Men.
Yeah.
I would say, there's more for me to.
It's more stimulating.
More to apply to my life in a meaningful way out of this book than Self-Care for Men, for sure. Because there were whole chapters of Self-Care for Men where I'm never going to use this information. Same with Atomic Attraction.
How is that collection of crystals doing for you?
Doing great. It still doesn't exist. So the problem will be when I have, hey, Dan, I bought my first crystal today. That's when you know things are not going good for me.
Gotcha.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
But yeah, we already covered that you're going to New Jersey tomorrow. I'm meeting my new cat sitter on Sunday. So looking forward to that. Going to do some grilling this weekend. Going to make some kebabs. My little Weber grill. Looking forward to that. So let's just jump into the last chapter because I'm anxious to get done with it. Frequently asked questions of love languages for men. What if I can't discover my primary love language? Okay, this is a make-believe question to me. There's free quizzes online. There's a quiz in the back of this book. Just retake it a couple times and you'll see it. It'll be clear which one is your top.
And try different things, right? Literally go through and look at some of the suggestions and see how it makes you feel by these different things, or getting involved in those.
And that's what he said.
Expressing or receiving.
If you're having trouble, then observe how you most often express your love to others. That wouldn't help me because my go-to is not giving people words of affirmation. Second, consider what you complain about most often. Again, I don't really complain, hey, you should be giving me more words of affirmation. I can't imagine a scenario where I would say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then third, think of the requests you make of your partner the most often. That kind of goes hand in hand. I'm not going to complain and I'm not going to. And that's something maybe I need to get over, but you tell me. With words of affirmation in particular, feels to me like if I have to ask you to do it, then how much does it mean when you finally do?
Right. Yeah.
But you could say that about all of them, I suppose. So if I have to ask you to do it, then it doesn't really feel like you're doing it for me.
So maybe the workaround is you and your partner go and sit down and just take the quizzes, and then you just share the results with each other, and then just see what happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like that. So the second, we don't really, I don't think we have to spend more time on that. Between all of the books that are available, used at the library, electronic versions, the free tests and quizzes that are available, just work it. Read the book, take the quiz, and you'll come up with something. And if you don't take the quiz again, and try to approach the questions a little differently with how you read them and how you think about them.
Yeah.
What if I can't discover my wife's love language?
Get a new wife. Next question. That was a short one.
If she doesn't have the time or interest to read the book, I'd suggest you answer variations of the 3 questions discussed in question 1. Like, if you're together though, and you're like, hey, I read this book cover to cover, I did the quiz, I'd love it if you did the quiz or if you read the book, and she's like, man, not interested.
Meh. M-E-H.
Yeah.
Meh.
Exactly.
Not interested.
Then do your best to try to figure out what hers is, but you've got a long road ahead of you. If you explain to your wife that this is important to you, you'd like for her to at least take the free quiz online, and she's like, no.
Let's get time for that.
Yeah, I'm not interested. I was like, okay. And then I think what the author would say is, okay, if your wife has no interest, then just decide to figure out her love language, speak it nonstop for a year with expecting nothing in return, and see if it turns her around. Okay, that's the course of action. That's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, and then later on in this chapter, he starts...
I'd give it a couple of weeks. A year? Are you kidding?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it either.
Who's got time for that?
If you're going to try to turn things around with no positive feedback for an extended amount of time, no, this... Either you've screwed up enough, or she's angry enough, or damaged enough, or whatever.
Yeah, bring in a third party.
Yes, absolutely.
And get some...
You get something. Figure something out.
Yeah.
I'm not going to... If I told you that was the cure for your physique or your golf swing or your career progression, just invest the time with your eyes closed for a year and see if things get better. No, I'm not doing it.
That's terrible advice.
Yeah. Does your primary love language change as you get older? He's got 3 paragraphs that say no. Essentially, the way you hear or speak your love language might change, but your core love language is going to be what it is. And that's, yeah, does it work with children? Yes, it works with children. Does a child's love language change when they get older? Again, not really.
What's interesting is he does recommend with children that parents do express their love with their primary love language, but also to intentionally
teach them all 5.
Teach them all 5.
Yeah.
So that they grow up knowing how to express that express love in each of the languages.
I agree.
And I think it's a great idea, because then they're able to connect better with whoever. They have more options, I feel like, for a healthy, strong relationship, because then they can recognize the other languages and then know how to communicate with them more natively, right?
Yeah, and as they grow older, be prepared for the dialects to change, because the physical touch you give your kid when they're a kid may not feel tolerable for them when they're a teenager.
Yeah.
They may not want the same kinds of hugs and kisses on the cheek and ruffling of their hair and stuff like that they enjoyed when they were little. They're probably not going to like that when they're a teenager.
What's interesting, I remember he said, but don't stop touching. If
Exactly.
Physical touch is their love language, don't withhold it. Look to see how you can modify it. So I think he's like a slug on the shoulder or a high five or something like that.
Yeah.
For our teenagers, a little bit more tolerable than like a hug. And I remember that even though physical touch wasn't my primary love language, I just felt awkward as I was getting older, always, hugging, my parents, or kissing, parents or family members when I was younger. It didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I would say just be prepared for, the way that you express it, or the way they want that it expressed to them, is probably going to change as they get older. And then through their teenage years, they may go back to some of the stuff that was cool when they were a kid. What if the primary love language of your wife is difficult for you? Oh, welcome to the party, right? The answer is you do it anyway, and you do it anyway by figuring out ways to make it repeatable and make it easy.
A relationship is work. This is the work.
Yeah, exactly. Are some of the languages found more among women and others found more among men? And the part that made me laugh about this, the way his answer to this question starts is, I've never done the research. Okay, you can stop there. I don't need to hear anything more. I've picked that up already through this book, that this is a book about anecdotes.
Yeah.
This isn't a book about research. I've never done the research to discover certain love languages are gender slanted. Anecdotal evidence suggests that more men have physical touch and words of affirmation, more women have quality time and gift giving.
But then the sentence right after that or something says...
But I don't know if it's statistically accurate.
Because you didn't do the research.
Exactly.
Okay, so why are we even having this question in here? There was no answer.
This is the anecdote, which it seems like now that you're giving the quiz away for free, it would be very easy to, ask somebody, what's your first name? What's your gender? Then look at the results, and it wouldn't be very hard to be able to gather that information very easily, I would say. But anecdotally, for me, that sounds about right too. From the conversation I've had with guys, most of them, it's words of affirmation and physical touch. And for the women, it seems to be quality time. Gift giving, not so much. So I think there's also some stigma to admitting that's your love language.
Yeah. And so much so that, like you pointed out, it should really be called gift receiving, because not gift giving, right? So he changed that for the stigma. But I think for men, that physical touch, I think it's confusing what that means, because I think I know before I read this book, and we think that's what physical touch is in terms of communicating love. It communicates good feelings for sure, but what kind of impact does that actually make? And that's not the actual, right? So it's like we said, it's hugging, holding hands, it's a pat on the shoulder, those things. Like, does that mean something to you, or is that just like an informal way to greet somebody, right? Like how I look at it. Because I used to think it was physical touch for me, but then I realized, yeah, I don't mind shaking hands and giving a hug, whatever, but that doesn't mean much to me other than just, hey, I like you and I want to greet you.
Yeah, I would say physical touch is my number 2, and I think that's legit for me. But I do wonder how many times someone will casually bring up their love language in conversation when it's a guy, and he'll say physical touch. And then if you say, okay, I'd like to learn more about that, but let's assume when you say physical touch, let's take all sex off the table, all foreplay off the table. Is it still physical touch if you remove all of those activities? And then I'd be curious to see what most guys would say.
Yeah, exactly.
Then how did you discover the 5 love languages? Is this really one of the frequently asked questions? I'm not so sure. But it's basically through anecdotes. I did counseling with people, and I noticed a pattern that
fit the model of 5 things.
Fit the model. That's easy to sell. And so...
Listen, you got to, that's the thing too, is if you've got a service, even if you think it's valuable, you got to be able to sell it. Otherwise, if it can't get out there, then what good is it sitting in your basement?
Yeah.
Or in your head.
He pulled it off. You got the books, the workshops, that this pattern that he created or discovered has certainly worked for him. Do the love languages work in other cultures? The answer is yes, but the dialects are different. Like the way that you can and do speak to people, touch people, be very different from place to place.
Just think about the different ways people in different countries, sometimes this can mean something different than this. And it's depending on what country you're in, right? So of course, there's going to be different dialects.
Yeah. And think about Asian cultures where you don't touch people without permission or in the right setting.
Or using the correct hand to shake hands.
Actually, some of those are a big deal. And so that makes sense that the dialects would change. But his opinion is that the languages don't. But again, he is not commissioned to study on this. Why do you think the 5 love languages have been so successful? I'm not interviewing the guy. This is not this might be a frequently asked question for when you sit down for radio or television interview.
Yeah, I don't think as a reader,
they're wondering this. Yeah, as a reader, I don't care. What if I speak my wife's love language and she doesn't respond? Okay, so this is where we get into some of the stuff. First and most likely, you're speaking the wrong love language. You think you know what your wife's love language is and you're speaking it, but you're not correct on that. Many husbands will assume that their wife's love language is acts of service. I'm just going to work my way into her good graces. Yeah.
That's, I think, a lot of men, we've got the skill set in doing things, acts of service.
I can do things for her that she can't easily do for herself. When I do them, she'll love me or feel like I love her.
Yeah, and it's also easy for me to do them.
That too, yeah.
I think that definitely, it's going to influence
It doesn't cost me in the ways that I find the most expensive to do this for her. I'll kill half a day detailing her car for her. It's easy to just do the mental math of, I'll fix my relationship by doing more chores around the house.
Mm-hmm.
If it were that easy, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Or in my case, it'd be great if I could fix my relationship by bringing some guy and paying him to do chores around the house. That's not the case. And that was said in response to the idea that you think you're speaking your partner's love language when you actually might not be. So the part of this section is, what if I'm speaking her love language and she's not responding? You might be wrong. You might be speaking what is the easiest to speak instead of what hers is the most important to hear.
And the other nuance here is, if you haven't figured out what your love language is, you might not realize that your giving love language might be acts of service. And so in your mind, you are speaking love to your wife if you haven't done all of the work and realize there's an act of receiving, there's a giving, there's yours, there's hers.
What are your favorite ones to give to somebody? What are your favorite ones to speak to someone else?
The same ones that I like. It's literally speaking. Yes, it's words of affirmation.
Mine are completely different.
Yeah.
I would rather buy things and do things for someone, where on my side, it's I want to first get the words of affirmation and the compliments, and then second is have them initiate the physical touch.
I see.
It's funny. Yeah, the ones I enjoy doing for other people is buying them things, doing stuff for them.
Interesting.
Those are my two. So yeah, mine don't match up. The second reason she might not be responding to you speaking her love language, this is a rough one, is because she's already involved in another romantic relationship.
Wow, we went all there.
Emotionally or sexually, and she'll she'll just kind of be like, okay, this is coming too late because I've already moved on to somebody else.
Yeah, her needs are being fulfilled.
Exactly. And not only the needs that you neglected, but also that initial rush that you get at the beginning of a new relationship where, where you basically feel like everything this person is doing is directly filling my love tank.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it very easy for her to perceive, okay, this guy feels like it's about over. And so now he's just doing this to manipulate me into giving it another shot or trying to whatever. And that can also be felt with your efforts to try to, when you can tell she's got one foot out the door, it's like, now I'll go to therapy. Now I'll start talking to somebody. Now I'll listen to that book she wanted me to listen to. And in some cases, your partner could be right. You are, even if you're not consciously thinking of it, I'm doing this now to manipulate her into giving me another shot. That could be exactly what you're doing. And even picking up this book could be that.
Absolutely. I think where you need to prove that it is not manipulation, if you don't think it is, the consistency is keeping up with it.
Right, which is something...
It's just a one-time thing, and then you're going back to the same old.
And you and I have talked about that on our special series that we'll release one of these days, where women fall in love with you due to consistent, attractive behavior, and they fall out of love with you due to consistent, unattractive behavior. And so when you want to turn that around, what's the cure? Oh, I wondered. You say I really mean it this time? No, the cure is also consistent, attractive behavior. And what's the key word in all that? Consistent and long-term and patterns, not just, hey, if things haven't gotten too bad yet, then yes, taking the action of coming home. If you're, for example, if you're not a reader really, and you're certainly not a nonfiction reader, you come home to your wife from the bookstore and say, hey, I got us this book. I think it could really do some wonders for our relationship. That could have a really big effect.
Yeah.
But if you've been disappointing her and helping her to build up resentment against you for months, years, decades, then something like that is going to be less impactful than, hey, you and I had a rough month and I went out and bought this book. That could be a huge difference.
Sure. Yeah. So it just depends on where you're starting from.
Exactly.
And how much further you need to go. This is the first thing that you're introducing that indicates that you want to work on things. Yeah, you got a little mountain to climb in front of you.
And that's really the same with any positive change, right?
Yeah.
Starting out in the gym, starting out on a diet. If you've got a lot of work to do, then it's going to be a lot longer before you start to see the benefits. And that's just the way it goes.
Yeah. And the only way to do that is be consistent, and you can't go big or go home. It was small. And I'm nudging Charles here because we had a previous discussion about this and literally a few minutes ago.
And yeah, we can bring that in because yes, the go big or go home attitude is setting yourself up for failure all the time. But there is, I believe that there is some positive benefits in saying, okay, I am going to adopt some long-term consistent behavior in very small ways, but I'm also going to kick it off by shaking things up a little bit. Like a lot of people that have success on the keto diet, they start that out with a fast where they go, without, they pretty much don't eat anything except for drinking water or coffee for a few days to get into that position where you can get kicked into ketosis faster than just switching to eggs and bacon. And there is some benefit to say, okay, I'm going to kick this off while my motivation's high, while I'm feeling really excited about it. I'm going to kick something off with some drastic, difficult behavior, and then we use that to build up the momentum that I'm going to then say, okay, I'm going to keep this going with more incremental small behaviors.
I think I'm all for that. I obviously see the benefit because that gets you motivated because you're seeing results immediately. So I think that's important to...
And it leverages your existing level of motivation.
Absolutely. I think it's really important when you're ever starting anything to really get some benefit that you're seeing as quickly as possible to keep going.
The low-hanging fruit.
Right. Just with the caveat that if, that then sabotages because, once you're done fasting, if you just start binging on carbs because you've been so hungry, you've been going so hard for so long or too long. And as long as you realize, hey, I'm not going to give up on the second phase of that process, which is eating keto, right?
Exactly.
As long as you're kind enough to yourself to realize, oops, maybe I overdid it a little bit. I went a little too big, maybe fasted a little bit too long, and I lost control, and not just give up on the whole idea of the keto diet because you crashed and burned.
And bringing that back to the book and how we can apply that to something like repairing a relationship, it's you set yourself up for say, okay, I'm going to take my partner away for a weekend and I'm going to focus on speaking her love language for the weekend. And then you get back on Monday. So even if when you get back, you feel like, man, I still feel like I'm motivated enough to go at this super hard Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Sometimes you have to tell yourself, no, don't do that. It's like you did it for the weekend, you worked hard. Now on Monday, even though you think you've got more of this manic energy to really attack this, no, I'm going to dial it back to a sustainable level. And you should do that when you're eating too. Like you start out with a fast of, okay, I'm going to fast for 2 days where I'm very highly compliant. And then on day number 3, I'm going to go back to more of a normal thing. On day number 3, if you feel like, oh, man, this feels great. I could do this for 4 or 5 more days. It's like sometimes you have to stop yourself and say, I'm not going to do that though. I'm not going to go overboard because then you do work into that go big or go home mentality. And then when you fall off the wagon, everything just goes to crap. It's important to say, okay, if I am going to dive into this book and dive into speaking her language and filling her tank, I'm going to start out real hard because I'm going to try to jumpstart this process. But I'm not going to trick myself into thinking that, oh, this is my new normal. I can do this every day.
Yeah.
Because that's when you set both of you up for failure.
Yeah.
Because she's going to be disappointed when it finally goes from a 10 to a 0 instead of going from a 9 to a 5.
Yeah.
And so I'm mostly talking to myself because I have that thing where I'm going to dive into this and start and go really hard. And then at some point, I'm going to start convincing myself that unsustainable effort is actually sustainable, and it's not.
One thing that I haven't done enough of whenever I've tried something to implement something new, and when I have done it, it's been helpful, has been to, before I even start, identify all the ways things could go wrong, all the obstacles that could come up, and what my strategy is to handle them. And the few times that I have done it has been very helpful for me to stay on track and maybe start over again, get back up on the horse when things went bad. And I'm just throwing that idea out there, setting some intentions, and then doing a little bit of planning ahead of time and say, hey, how could this backfire on me? Or
right.
And one of those things could be, hey, I'm getting her flowers 5 days in a row might annoy her, and not to give up on the whole process, knowing I'm taking a risk by going that extreme, right? Instead of just one day and then scaling it back, for example.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point that when you think about it, what feels like the most negative aspect of disappointment? Well, it's the surprise. It's when you thought things were going to go better and they didn't. Where, if you make that list of here's everything that could go wrong, and here's how I'm going to try to feel about it, and here's how I'm going to try to react to it when it does go wrong, then you've removed some of that emotional shock that you experience from the surprised disappointment.
And your past self has done a favor for that future self.
I'm
now
about that.
But you've put together at least a loose plan on what you should be doing. So when those emotions are running high from that feeling of failure or that mistake that's made, you don't have to then spend more energy thinking how to fix it because your past self has already given you a couple of ideas.
Right.
Doesn't have to be perfect, but hey, and at least it's a plan.
And just in conceptualizing what could go wrong and how will I feel about it, it's almost like you've experienced some of those negative emotions in advance.
So it probably tampers down
exactly
when you're actually going through it.
I think it does. Yeah, it does for me. Absolutely.
We got to remember this. You're going to do this for the next thing we're trying to do, right?
You got to live by it too. It's not enough to just say it. What are you talking about? No, my advice is for other people, not for me. Okay, so there are a couple parts in here where he says stuff that I think is a little wacky. The best approach you can take is to continue to speak her love language on a regular basis, no matter how she treats you. Okay, that language is not okay. No matter how she treats you.
I think it's just sloppy and lazy to say that. Was he just trying to finish this book?
There are people in abusive relationships. There are people in emotionally neglectful relationships. If you try some of these things, and not only does she not respond in the most ideal way, but she mocks you, or she makes fun of you, or then
you don't need to end the relationship immediately, but then bring in a third party, bring in a professional. At that point, that's an indicator. That's not a normal reaction, I feel, right?
Right.
In a healthy relationship where somebody actually cares about the other person,
we're not
invested in working on it. You don't need to worry about what you just said,
right? The
mockery or whatever.
Yes, but when you do this and her reaction is not as positive as you'd like it to be, or even somewhat neutral, then yes, keep your head down and keep moving forward. But
that's a good way of putting it, like neutral or not exactly, or not what you expected.
Right.
But if it's an obvious, problem for her.
If this brings up some sort of hostility and prolonged hostility, then you need to say, okay, I'm trying to make an effort here to make this relationship better. And it's like, you're responding to that effort to make things better with some anger. And we're not going to get on make things better progression if you're giving me hostility when I start this process.
And it goes back to something you were talking about before off camera, was you're trying your best at this point, or you think you're at least trying your best.
Right.
And clearly it's not good enough. And that's when you get the professional help.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Don't beat yourself up. And
look, that is something a lot of us run into. We try to solve problems created by our brain, or our brain and our partner's brain. Like, our two brains came together and some problems resulted. And so now I'm going to assume that these same two brains that got us into this are going to be able to get us out of this. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's your problem solving skills, the way you relate to other people. That is what created this difficult situation that you're in right now. And those two brains that made the problem, without any new information or new patterns or new people, they're not going to be able to solve the problem.
Exactly.
You've got to bring something else into this equation, because if you try to solve the problem with these same ingredients, the problem's not going to get solved. It's just, things are just going to continue.
And even, it's not guaranteed that it won't get solved, but you are wasting so much time hoping you're going to get lucky.
Correct.
The permutation of how you're thinking and how she's thinking without any new information is going to result into something different.
Exactly.
It could, but why are you going to waste? Time is precious. Go to a professional, go to someone who's got the shortcuts, who knows what they're doing, save you time and energy. Yeah, it's an investment in money, but you can't get your time back.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So he doubles down on this thing we disagree with, saying that your attitude should be, no matter what her response is, I'm going to love her in her love language over the long haul. If she walks away from me, she will walk away from someone who is loving her unconditionally.
I got a problem with long haul.
I do too.
I can understand maybe going at it and giving even a little leeway with the, no matter what her response is. I think if she's so disgusted with you by your previous behavior, maybe it could be a little bit negative at the beginning, but give it a shot for a few weeks or a month.
Right. He says
long haul.
Set yourself a goal of 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
Yeah,
And listen, if you've got a professional involved in the situation, and even if you're just going to therapy by yourself, if you're not doing couples, if she's not going to therapy, you're going to therapy by yourself, and you've got somebody in your corner saying, okay, you're going to stay on this course, and I'm going to help you recognize signs of progress that might not feel like signs of progress, and you're still getting those signs of progress even though you're not getting exactly what you're looking for, then okay, maybe stick with it for 6 months or a year. But just trying to white knuckle it yourself, working yourself on this when you're seeing no results for 12 months, and then acting as if you'll have the comfort of saying, I loved her unconditionally for a year and then she left me anyway. You're not going to feel great after that result happens. You're going to feel like shit when that happens.
Yeah, I think the detail that you just laid out is very important that he forgot to put in there, because his perspective, if I had to guess, is probably working with people, right? If he's he's been working with a couple for 6 to 9 months, that's different. Like you said, you can point out little bits of progress that they're not going to be able to see, but you can't give that advice to somebody who's not working with anybody for 6 to 9 months. I feel like,
I can't think of...
You're setting someone up for failure.
I can't think of a single area of improvement in your life where any good coach who's actually worked with people and seen what humans behave like would say, I need you to commit to doing this for a year without seeing any outward signs of improvement whatsoever.
Yeah, even working with somebody, that's a big ask, who can point out the little things.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? To do it without anybody, forget it. No way.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing something for more than a few weeks without seeing some kind of, hey, this is worth your time, this is worth your effort.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm unreasonable with that, but I don't know. I don't think so. Don't you agree? Doing something, investing heavily in an activity and seeing no benefit or no impact, positive impact for weeks, it wouldn't take me many weeks to say, that's it. I tried. I'm done.
Yeah.
I got to see the number on the scale go better. I got to be able to run for more minutes than I could run when I started. I've got to be able to lift heavier weight. I've got to see something that tells me, okay, you're not just throwing darts at a board and hoping that it works out.
Exactly. And that's why I mentioned before, when you first start something, you want to see some results immediately. Ideally, you don't do it in a way that's super stressful, like the whole go big or go home type of thing. But so it would be helpful to work with somebody, because then they can point out the little victories or whatever. And that kind of helps bring them to your attention type of thing. But I think it's got to be immediate, because everybody feels like they don't have enough time for anything. So if you're going to invest time, especially in something that doesn't feel good, that's going to be the first thing to go.
Yeah, or certainly feels uncomfortable or unnatural.
And you're not getting your results out of it.
Yeah, but here's the good news, though. I guess we shouldn't call it good news, but here's what I have observed. In most male-female relationships, the bar for men showing positive growth in areas like mental health and communication, the bar's so low that just showing up at home with this book that you ordered it on Amazon or you bought it at the store and coming home,
that will do wonders.
It's huge. In most relationships, if you're not the guy that does that kind of thing, that you're not obsessed with self-help books or relationship books, or you don't have a men's mental health podcast, just by going to the store and buying this book and taking a couple minutes a day to open it up and read it is going to feel like you're moving the earth to the woman you're with.
It absolutely could.
I would say in most cases it will.
Yeah.
Again, especially if you're not the guy that usually does that kind of thing. And
it means you're open to it,
exactly.
Right? And that is a huge benefit. And it's something that I look for in friends and partners as well, is just that you're open to new ideas. Like you don't have it all figured out and you are basically closed off to anything new. To me, that's dangerous.
Yeah, and I only bring that up to say, don't use the idea of, I could read this book and try to work this for a year. It's a possibility, and neither Dan or I are saying you should just put your head down and grin and bear it. I find just about all the women I know, much less the ones I've been in relationships with, would feel very encouraged and very hopeful that you're even opening up this book and starting to talk to her about some of these topics. Their attitude is not going to be to fold their arms and pretend as if you're not taking any effort.
Yeah.
Just any effort is going to be enough to usually encourage your partner to want to get into this with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're usually going to experience. Okay, so can love be reborn after sexual infidelity? I think that is fair to put this in the frequently asked questions, because he probably does get that question often. And he's more optimistic in this area than I am. I don't know that it's never come to me, the knowledge that I've been cheated on in a relationship. So I don't know that I don't think it's ever happened. I could be wrong about that, because none of us can really know for 100% certainty, especially looking back at previous relationships, that when you're with your partner, it's very easy to say, yeah, obviously she's never cheated on me. I've never cheated on her. I know that to a certainty. But then you look back at other relationships that didn't work out the way you wanted, and you're like, maybe it is possible that there's something going on that I didn't know about. But I have always had the perception of myself that this was something that I would not be able to recover from, just because of my own personal experiences growing up with neglect, betrayal, abandonment, stuff. I don't think that I could tolerate a partner coming back after infidelity, and I've never had to try. The numbers that people are quick to say, the thing about statistics is, in individual cases, it's either 0% or 100%. But when you look at it in larger populations, okay, how successful are reconciliations after somebody cheats? And the answer is not very. It's somewhere around 15%. A partner who has ever cheated on someone in a relationship is 3.5 times more likely to cheat in the future than someone who's never cheated. So it's hard for me to turn off the front part of my brain that cares about numbers like that.
Sure.
And anybody could end up being part of that 15% where it works, but that's enough of a small number for me that I would say, I'm already feeling all these negative emotions about this person. I don't know that I would be willing to try it.
It would be difficult to mend that. I feel like a lot of trust is violated and broken, and it's not just the physical act that happened, right? There's some deception and things like that now. And then that could also lead to, hey, maybe there's a problem that you initiated perhaps in the relationship, but maybe the way she handled it wasn't the ideal way, right? So then,
and
moving forward, what guarantees do you have that she's going to start handling things in a different way instead of cheating? Hey, I'm upset with what you did or whatever. I think it just gets really sticky and messy.
Yeah, I would be the first to agree, and I think based on other books I've read, other research I've read, there does seem to be some truth to the fact that cheating for men can often be a crime of opportunity. You got an unexpected chance to cheat, and so you took that chance, and that doesn't make it okay. I'm just saying that I think guys would say yes to circumstances that could lead to cheating in a way that women don't, where for the most part, if a woman cheats in a relationship, it's because she feels like she's got a reason to cheat because of a hopeless situation in her current relationship.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that morally justifies either party. Your motivation for why you cheat doesn't make cheating okay. It doesn't, as far as right or wrong goes, it doesn't matter. But it does help you understand, why did this happen? What are the chances it would happen again? What has to happen for me to believe that it's not likely to happen again? And I would almost say that both the man and the woman in a situation where cheating happens, both of them have to have almost some sort of spiritual awakening or realignment, where a lot of your ideas about the world, yourself, your partner, other people, like all of that kind of has to change in a very meaningful way if both parties are willing to look at it and say, yeah, I think we've got a good shot of recovering from this.
Yeah. And then that being said, is having the ideas like we've talked about is one thing, but then when the situation happens again that perhaps caused the initial infidelity and cheating, are they able to then execute on those ideas and do things differently, communicate differently so that the actual cheating doesn't happen again, right? That's where the rubber meets the road, right? Can you then take those ideas and actually use them and make them effective to prevent things like that from happening again? That's another big question. And you really won't know that answer until that situation happens again. So you're rolling the dice.
Yeah. And I would say, again, even my knee-jerk reaction is I wouldn't consider even entertaining this possibility in my own life. But if I was going to, it would have to be under the care and direction of a professional who has an evidence-based program where, okay, this is how couples that have been through this are able to come together. And and both partners would have to be willing to say, okay, I'm going to do all of these exercises. I'm going to follow all this advice. I'm going to do all the things that this professional is telling me to do, regardless of how uncomfortable they feel or whatever. The evidence says your greatest chance of succeeding at this is if you follow this, whatever this program is, this evidence-based scientific program for reconciling after infidelity. And yeah, if I either had the attitude, I'm not going to do all these things, or my partner's, I'm not going to do all these things, then I would have a hard time believing it was going to really go anywhere positive.
Yeah. For me, it would be important to then also set boundaries with that, with the other person.
That would be part of
just to say, okay, if this doesn't happen or if this does happen, what are the consequences for those, right? And get those established in advance. Like we were just talking about the pre-planning of obstacles and problems. That would need to be completely objective and out on the table. So everybody sees what's at stake here. Oh, I'll just, one person could be under the impression, oh, we're going to try this. It doesn't work out. Oh, we'll just try it again. Even if I make that mistake again. And the other person could be like, that was your last chance. So I think it's really important to set those expectations up front.
Okay. What do you do when your wife refuses to speak your love language, even though she knows it? You ask questions. Why won't you speak to me? And there could be a lot of reasons. It could be that she has particular trauma or discomfort around that language. Like she could come from a family where either they didn't touch or somebody touched her in a way that wasn't okay. And so there's going to be some energy and some trauma around physical touch if that's the case. So again, asking questions is going to be how you get to the root of this, because for most people, their answer is not going to be, I don't want to speak to you in your love language just because I don't want to. That's not going to be the answer that you get from almost anybody who either cares about the relationship or has some level of mental health that allows them to function in a society, much less in a relationship, right? Yeah. Nobody's going to say, I just don't want to, and then try to leave it there. And if they do at first, it's still your job to help get to the bottom of that and ask the questions and say, okay, let's talk about this. A second reason might be, okay, if I give him a little bit, he's going to immediately get complacent and stop filling my tank. And again, that's probably also a learned reaction. That's not something that she's probably just making up out of thin air. It's probably something she's seen before in either previous relationships or more likely her relationship with you.
And it's an assumption that she's making.
Right.
It's not based on facts at this point. It could be a previous experience.
It could be based on patterns.
Correct. But if you're willing then to be having these discussions and bringing her this information and willing and wanting to talk about it, I feel like you're less likely to keep repeating the previous patterns, right? So she could be, that being said, right? It's not wrong for her to be worried and understand, though, that you have an opportunity, though, and again, you're going to have to work a little bit, probably, if you've created those patterns in the past.
Right.
So, but be okay with that, and don't just give up because she's skeptical.
Yeah, and that ties back to the chapter we did on apologizing, where it's, especially when you have a history with somebody that's a complicated history of both meeting their needs and failing to meet their needs and ups and downs. And often it's not enough. You don't get credit for announcing your intentions to someone, right?
I wish.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that'd be great, right?
Yeah, it would. No,
I'd be a rich man.
You can get some credit for announcing your intentions and your plan, but you get the most credit for delivering on your intentions and your plan.
Like everything else in life.
Yeah. So step one is say, hey, I've decided that I'm going to work on the way I relate to you. And the unspoken part is, regardless of what you decide to how you're going to relate to me, I'm going to make some efforts to relate to you in the way that you need. Here's my plan to do that. And now here's you getting to watch me deliver on that plan.
Yeah.
But if it's just announcing the intention, yeah, big deal. You're like, and it's easy. Talk is cheap, right?
Yep.
It's easy to announce your intentions for something. It's a little bit harder to announce your intentions plus your plan on delivering. And it's the most hard to announce your intention, share the plan, and then actually implement the plan on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I think all three of those components are important. You should be, because if you try to decide I'm just going to do this completely behind the scenes, that's also not as effective as sharing the intention and the plan at the beginning.
It's an opportunity for you to really display the kind of person that you want to be by
and that you're work toward being.
Right, that you are delivering on the things that you're saying you're going to do.
Right.
And so that absolutely, I think, helps foster trust and for that other person to really get to know who you are in a good way.
Yeah, and when it comes to other areas of improvement, the data does say that it also does help you making the verbal announcement that you intend to get better at something.
Commitment.
You will have more success at getting better at that thing by telling people that you're working to get better at that thing. And again, whether that's your friend, your wife, your therapist, whatever, it does help to say
accountability.
Yeah, I'm gonna, not only am I gonna plan to do this, but I'm gonna plan to do this and tell people that I'm planning to do it. And that, there are days that will get your nose in the book or get your butt in the gym or whatever.
Yeah, when you're on the fence.
Don't want to be the guy who put this out there and then doesn't deliver on it. That's embarrassing.
Egg on the face. No, thank you.
Yeah. So there's ways to use that in a healthy way to positively motivate, I believe. There's ways to do it in an unhealthy way too, but I think there are definitely ways to use that. Hey, everybody, I'm adopting the identity of a guy who does fill in the blank. And then that can, because generally the guy who wants to become that guy is the guy who talks about being that guy. So you don't want to be the guy who just tries to keep it all inside and do it under the radar so that if you fail, nobody will know. But you also don't want to be the guy who just talks about it and never does it.
It's so weird. I don't know anybody like
I mean,
take that mirror away from me.
Depending on what day it is and what the intention is, I've been both of those guys. I've been the guy who talks and doesn't do. And I've been the guy who thinks, oh, I'll just do but not talk. And then if I fail at it, nobody will know. And it doesn't seem like either of those is a path to really making the change happen. The path is, I'm going to announce it and I'm going to do it.
For sure.
Okay, so I want to see how this came across to you, this one section here. Again, we're in the part of what if she knows my love language, but she doesn't want to speak it. He says, my suggestion is that you initiate the love tank game which was from chapter 7, which basically says, on a scale of 0 to 10, how full is your love tank? And if she answers anything less than 10, you say, what could I do to help fill it? Whatever she says, do it to the best of your ability. If you do this once a week for a month, chances are she will start asking you how full your love tank is. And you can begin making requests of her. This is a fun way of teaching her how to speak your love language. For whatever reason, the thing that kind of jumped out at me was a couple of phrases from No More Mr. Nice Guy, giving to get and covert contract.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's a way to do this that is not immediately occurring to me that doesn't feel like you're giving to get or engaging in a covert contract. But yeah, it does seem if you're asking her about her love tank and you're trying to fill hers up and hoping that chances are, if you do this, she'll start asking you about yours. Because this section is, what do you do when your wife refuses to speak your love language, even though she knows it?
Mm-hmm.
It does color it to me a little bit like, here's a trick where you can get her to care about your love language.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I do get that taste.
Yeah.
From the way he phrased things there. But at the same point, I feel like maybe this is at the end of the book. This is one of those, what if my wife just isn't responding or getting it after I'm making some of these efforts and things? It's almost, I am also getting a sense that this is a Hail Mary too type of thing where, not to go back to this religious thing, but so I agree with you. It is a little bit covert contracty and giving to get type of thing, but it could be one of those where the subtleties of having her take the quiz or responding in the past just isn't working, and you need to dial it up a little bit if you feel like you've got a lot of other really good things going on with your partner, and it's just, okay, look, I need to make it a little bit more obvious, perhaps. I don't know if I'd want to lead with this strategy because of the whole giving to get type of thing.
Yeah.
I think my idea here is you start with a quiz and see how that goes and see what kind of response you get. To me, that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. This does strike me as, like some of the stuff earlier in the book, this feels like very churchy dating/relationship advice, where it's like, I go back to that story of this guy was in this girl's friend zone, and so he takes her to a ball game, and then they catch a foul ball, and he puts together or buys an ornate display case for the foul ball and gives it to her, and then she's so moved by this gift that now she feels romantic attraction where before she only saw him as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. This is a story that somebody who's very naive and inexperienced in dating would think that it's supposed to work, because that's how I thought it would work when I was a teenager or in my early 20s. That's why that's how I thought people come together. And that's what it feels like this is too, where it's just, oh, if you want her to care about your love language, just go overboard caring about hers, and then she'll start. And yeah, that's true. That might happen that way. But if you're doing this because, oh, if I treat her this way, then she'll start to act this other way that I want her to act. That always seems to backfire. When I try to get something out of somebody by pouring on the sugar and being sweet to them, it never turns out the way that I want it to.
That's fair.
And I think that's what this feels like.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't think it's the best strategy, but I feel like it's, again, hey, you know what? I want to try everything possible to try to save this. I just need to somehow wake her up to this concept, right, of us reading each other's love languages and responding to each other, because she just hasn't responded. And I could see that being just another tool, but not one that I would start with.
Yeah, I think that this kind of, I guess what bothers me about it flies in the face of the relationship scientist role that seems to be the most effective way to get things done positively in your own life and in your relationships. I've decided that my wife is behaving, or my partner is behaving toward me in a way that tells me she doesn't feel loved, she doesn't feel safe, she doesn't feel seen, she doesn't feel heard. So I'm going to experiment with trying to meet her needs as well as I can for as long as I can, and then observe what are the results, what happens when I do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he phrases it, it seems more like I'm not getting my needs met. What can I do to get my needs met? And the answer is, okay, I'll act like I'm committed to meeting her needs, filling her love tank for a while, and see if she gets the message and starts treating me that way too.
Yeah, the better way to go about this is try to find pleasure in filling her love tank. Right?
Yeah, and whether that's intellectual pleasure of I'm going to try this experiment and see how it works out, or I'm going to just learn ways to fill her love tank that I really enjoy and get something out of.
And there's a possibility that you're going to get some good results and then get something out of it.
At the very least,
don't do it for only that reason.
Right. Yeah. The reward is...
Because I feel like it could be hollow too, right? In terms of what you're doing, it's not going to be that effective as well.
Yeah. The thing that the benefits that seem would be the most valuable to you is I'm going to do this so that I can learn what it feels like to be a man who does this. And I'm going to do this so I can seemingly, expectedly watch her enjoy the company of a man who values this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And so if you go into it with that mindset, I think you're more likely to experience the success that you want than if it's, I feel neglected, I feel like this is unfair, I feel like she knows my love language, but she's not taking steps to speak to me in it. So what can I do? How can I get her to like me, love me, respect me, treat me the way I want to be treated? Oh, I'll do this for her for a while and see if she starts. It's just, again, it's not, it could be best case scenario. It's just naive phrasing that he's using. Still rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. And I think the undertone here with all of this is you need to go into this with a expectation and a mindset that you enjoy when your partner is happy. Like you get joy out of that. That is the benefit for you, is seeing somebody that you love and you care about be happy, and you derive joy from their happiness. And I think if you can go in with that mindset, with all these actions that you're taking, they're going to come across as sincere. They're going to come across with that flavoring of, hey, I'm doing this because I love you. And that's going to be very obvious versus if you're not there yet, where you still need something besides her joy to come out of this. That's going to come across too in how you do these things, how you monitor what's going on afterwards. It's going to be very obvious that people, even if we can't express them in words, humans are very good at reading other people's body languages. Even with our subconscious, it's going to come out. You're not going to be that good of an actor if these intentions are selfish.
All right. So the next question was, can emotional love return after it's been gone for 30 years? And he basically shares a case of a couple who did get into this well down the road. And yes, it did turn things around. They both felt some regret that they lived the way that they had for as long as they had without changing things. And I think that's the case with any positive change. It doesn't matter how long you've not been doing things right. You can always learn a new, better way to do things. And I think that's true as well. I'm single. How does the love language concept apply to me? Okay, he does have another book for singles that I bought, but I haven't opened up and started reading yet. He had this story, though, that did again communicate, to me at least, the misunderstanding on acts of service. We hit that pretty heavy on that chapter where, basically, in my opinion, this will be a wild example, or maybe an overstated example. You and your wife share a master bathroom, and generally she's the one that cleans it. And then it's okay. You go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you forget to lift the seat up and you pee all over the seat. And then you realize it and you're like, oh, before I go back to bed, I better clean this up.
Yeah.
Look at the act of service I've just done for you. That's not an act of service. That's cleaning up a mess you made.
Yeah.
Because if you wake up 2 hours later and she stayed in bed the whole time and you have to go poop in the middle of the night and you sit down on a toilet seat covered in your own pee, that's not fun for you either. So cleaning up your own mess helps you out and helps her out. So it's not an act of service.
It goes back to what you're talking about in terms of the bar being so low that you just order the book. And that's a big deal. That speaks to take a step back if you can and look at where that bar is, like where you're starting from here, right? With those acts of service, right? So
And don't
you may have a little bit further to go than you realize. And that's where like a third party or professional would be able to help guide you and go, oh, okay, look, that's not really an act of service here.
I agree. And so here's an example where I think he gets it wrong, where he talks about a guy who his love language is physical touch, and he's about to go to prison, and his mother hugs him goodbye on the day he's about to go to jail. And he says, the first hug I ever remember getting from my mother was the day I left for prison, but I realized that she spoke acts of service very strongly. Oh, interesting. What are the acts of service? She worked very hard to keep us in food and clothes and provide us a place to live.
Yeah, that's not. I remember hearing that too, and like, that just didn't.
Having a kid and keeping them fed and clothed and not living outdoors is not loving them with acts of service. Talk about the bar being low. That's the bare minimum is you keep your kids fed, clothed, and indoors. And so, no, in this case, I want to shake this guy and be like, you had a shitty mom.
Yeah.
And she doesn't get credit for keeping food in your belly and clothes on your back. You give her credit for that, but don't call it acts of service.
Right.
I know now that she loved me, she simply wasn't speaking my language. It's like a mom that never touches her kid doesn't love her kid. I'm sorry. Like you got it wrong. And this Dr. Chapman, he's got it wrong too.
Yeah.
Your mom didn't love you. I'm sorry. It sucks, but your mom didn't love you.
Yeah. I think he's using that example with the prison to set that bar really low and to say, hey, this guy.
Yeah, but he accidentally got out a shovel and buried the bar under the ground. There's no bar. I can't see the bar anymore.
Yeah, he should just left that out. I don't understand.
My love language was physical touch maybe because your mother never touched you, your love language is physical touch?
It could be.
And the only time she ever gave you a hug was when you were going to prison. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's not fun to hear your mom didn't love you, but your mom didn't love you.
Yeah.
At least not in any meaningful way.
Here's the thing. What was that, like 3 sentences there? We have no idea what the day-to-day looked like. You know what I'm saying?
I would almost say it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Your mom has never hugged you until you were going off to prison.
Yeah. That's a little bit,
I mean,
rough.
That's like saying, oh, my mother's love language wasn't words of affirmation, so she never said a single positive thing about my whole life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, her love language wasn't words of affirmation, but I'm sure she was great.
He says, though, with children, you should be sprinkling in all of the love languages.
Right.
At some point. So for him to never have gotten a hug.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, if there's one,
he clearly didn't read the book.
If there's one love language that your parent has never, ever spoken to you in the first 20-something years of your life, then, yeah, I'm sorry, you lost the parent lottery and you got one that didn't love you. Not in any way that has made you a healthy person.
Mm-hmm.
And that sucks. I'm sorry. I'm sure there are people out there who have never gotten quality time. I mean, certainly any dad that bails out on their kid as soon as they find out that mom's pregnant, they're not getting any quality time.
Yeah. What's interesting is he doesn't say anything like she would never hug me or touch me, but she wrote kind cards for me to encourage me in school and things like that. He didn't say any of that. There was no other type of love language that he mentions in that, right?
No, acts of service and keeping you fed and clothed is the only example that he offers.
That's not even acts of service. If it was like, oh, she would drive me to, my basketball games and, would make sure that I had the clothes that I needed for the basketball and, would a little bit more than just feed and shelter, right? That's
right.
It was a poor example.
All she did was give you food, give you shelter, and keep clothes on your back. She never hugged you, and now you're going to prison.
Yeah.
All these ingredients add up to you were
not
traumatized and abused by your mother who didn't love you. So, yeah, and the fact that this doesn't occur to the author of this book, he could have put any combination of letters and words together that he wanted to, and he chose this one. It makes me think, okay, what else does this guy not get about how the world works?
Yeah, and how the editors did not pick up on that either.
Yeah, like nobody in the chain of getting this from an idea into my hand. Wait a second, we can't say this. It's crazy. So yeah, that really did jump out at me, and I felt like I had to rant on it for a good few minutes.
Yeah.
How do I speak my spouse's love language if he or she is away from me for a time? Deployment, work, school. Man, I don't know. He gives some advice on how you can try to make this work, and he has a 5 love languages for people in the military book that you can buy, which
Convenient.
But
Does it have 5 love languages for people in prison yet? Is that one of the...
yeah, if he thinks he can make a nickel, I'm sure he'll put it out. But yeah, my needs would not allow me to be in a long distance relationship where it's okay, if your priority or your previous contracts involve you being gone from me for long lengths of time, then this isn't going to work. I can't do it.
Yeah. There's a reason why there's a stigma around long-term relationships.
Long distance.
Long distance.
Yeah.
Long distance
relationships too.
Yeah. But long distance, there's a reason why people are very skeptical of, and it's got a reputation for it, not working. I mean, relationships are difficult enough.
Exactly.
You're going to add some extra problem to that
Yes.
and stress.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. Relationships where proximity is not an issue are hard enough to make work. So yeah, you put huge amounts of distance and huge amounts of time in the mix where, yeah, I'm sure with technology and work schedules that are maybe more flexible, there are more ways now than there ever have been to try to make it work. But yeah, I would say that it's going to be hard. And he does offer some advice for how you can basically each love language. It's okay, here's a way that you can try to get the most out of this in a remote long distance situation that you possibly can. But I would say just don't enter into those relationships lightly without realizing how much harder it's going to be for you than if you guys live in the same town.
Yeah, clearly you need a plan to end the long distance period, right? I don't think it's ever going to be a successful relationship unless at some point you guys are not long distance anymore.
Yeah, I would.
And so I think without a solid plan that says, okay, at this point, things are going to change.
Yeah.
Don't even bother.
Here's how long.
Don't leave it open-ended.
Yeah, here's how long we can do this if we see each other this often. All right, anything else? Do you have any other frequently asked questions that you wish he might have covered that he didn't? Anything occur to you while you were reading this book that the one that I have put out there a couple times when we've been talking about this is, what are the processes by which we settle on these primary love languages? What happens to us, both good things and bad things that happen to us as kids that kind of make us settle on whatever primary language, and what impact do those experiences have on how we communicate and receive communication? And again, I feel like for him to answer those questions, he would have had to have approached this book in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
Like hiring researchers and grad students and commissioning studies and things like that would have had to have been something. But this book is definitely what I think most people would call pop psychology. A lot of people, when they write books on relationships and psychological topics, they're basically giving you the tip of the iceberg of all of the experience and research and scholarship that they have used to build a career and make themselves a peer-reviewed expert in this area, where I feel like Dr. Chapman put it all on the field with this book. Like, we're getting everything he's got to offer in this book.
It could be. And
that's what it feels like when I read it. When I read a book like The Body Keeps a Score, or even Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before, I get the feeling like there's a lot more under the surface that this author has decided not to get into because she wants to make it very accessible to the layperson buying the book at Barnes & Noble or on Amazon. Where in this case, I feel like Dr. Chapman's put it all out there. Like all the research and experience that he's put in the 30 however many flavors of 5 love languages, and it is what it is.
It could be. And I agree. I feel like it is the tip of the iceberg, and I think it's a very digestible way for people to at least open up to communicating more about what their needs are and understanding what other people's needs could be. And I absolutely see value in it. And some people, this might be enough for them. Other people, it may not go deep enough.
Yeah, one of the things one of the positive things I would say that you and I probably both experienced reading this book is a lot of books, especially when it comes to psychology and relationships, I'll get into it for a while and feel like, okay, enough of the theory. Now tell me what to do. This book is all what to do. There's no academic theory. Let me build up my case. Before I start telling you what to do, I want to both build up my own credentials, my own experience, and tell you about all the research for why you should trust what I say is what you should actually do. He doesn't do any of that in this book. He goes straight to, here's what you need to do.
Yeah, it's the feel good. You're right, because you feel like you're doing something. So I totally see what you're talking about there. It's either one or the other a lot of times, right?
The best books, I say, they
can do both. Exactly.
Why
has nobody told me this before?
And Dating Essentials for Men by Robert Glover. It's like,
yeah,
the first 2/3 of that book is basically him saying, here's how to get your head right around dating and relationships, and basically, get yourself viewing dating and relationships in a healthy, objectively honest way first. And now I'll actually tell you how to go out there and meet a pretty girl.
Yeah.
And he did a pretty good job of that with Dating Essentials for Men.
For me, this was good. I really got the most out of the apology section, and literally today taking that quiz, realizing what means the most to me, and having that information, I think, definitely helps me guide my decisions, my actions, and my communication moving forward. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if either of us can actually apply that to our relationships in this way, where your partner does something, it bothers you, they apologize for it, and then you're willing to say, hey, look, I appreciate you put forth the effort to apologize, but for this to make me feel whole again, what I actually need to hear from you is blah, blah, blah. I've never had that conversation with somebody, and it's hard for me to imagine that I ever would.
I don't think I'd go that route. What I literally think I would do is refer them to the section here on that book and say, hey, listen, there's a number of different ways that we can apologize, and I got a lot of value out of this. Would you be willing to take this?
You going to tell her what your language is,
I'm
though?
not going to say anything unless she asks.
Oh, okay.
My only ask would be, hey, I got some value out of this. Are you willing to also invest in, I feel like I would hope that she'd at least read it and then just continue the conversation from there. And if she asks about what mine is, then great. If not, okay, let's take that information and do something with it.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, because it could feel a little covert contracty if you're not willing to say, hey, babe, this is what the apology that works for me sounds like, then it's almost like you're willing to say, I'm okay not being apologized to in the way that it actually helps.
At some point, I probably would say, yeah, what do you think? I would definitely be leading to, I would want her to have the opportunity to ask me. I would probably, I don't know if that's covert contracty, maybe it is a little bit, but because
in a situation where your partner has already apologized to you, but she's apologized in a way that doesn't make you feel like you're ready to move on and close the door,
I can see that.
I feel like you almost have to say,
yeah,
I appreciate the apology, but I need more. I'm not ready. I'm not okay yet.
And here's some ideas. Okay, so I think that it is a better strategy what you just said. I think that's a little bit.
It's harder too, though.
But it is at least more upfront about it. And why do you want me to read this? It's because I feel like we're not on the same page when it comes to what an apology means.
And it's tough. I'll be honest. I've tried this, and before I even knew about the book, and I've said, I need your apology to include, I was wrong when I did blah, blah, blah. And the answer I got was, no, I'm not saying it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, let's move forward in this relationship and just hope it works out.
Yeah.
Guess what happened, Dan? It didn't work out. Look, I don't want somebody to say I was wrong if they don't think I was wrong. If you want right. I wasn't wrong. I don't want you to say I was wrong, even though you don't believe so. But then what that does is it shines a giant spotlight on, we've got a values mismatch. And then that values mismatch is going to keep cropping up in all kinds of inconvenient and painful ways. until the relationship ends, and then that's that. And that's what happens sometimes. But yeah, I would say if you're in a relationship with somebody, and this is definitely going back on our last episode, if they're never apologizing to you in the way that you need to be apologized to, then that is a pretty loud neon sign that says, okay, we don't see relationships the same way. And it's okay. We either need to put in some work to get on the same page, or we need to realize that we're not good partners for each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And bottom line is, if they're willing to put in that work, great. If they're not, look, I think you're going to save yourself some time. Move on.
But part of it is you need to put in the work yourself to get to the point where you can even recognize that, hey, I'm receiving apologies that don't meet my needs.
Yes.
And most of us aren't there. Most of us aren't.
Yeah, I wasn't until literally I read the chapter.
Exactly.
I didn't know what my needs were.
We had this argument and you apologized, but I'm still angry and hurt about this. I wonder why that is.
Exactly. It just doesn't feel right. I don't feel like we're on the same page.
When all you can say is, this still doesn't feel right, you're not really empowering your partner to make any decisions to make things better.
Because you don't know yourself.
Exactly.
This is all about figuring out yourself first, and then that's what our whole podcast is.
Exactly.
Basically, is figure out yourself first, and then so you can communicate what that is to the world.
Yeah. And as usual, even though I had a bunch of gripes and a bunch of complaints about this book, I think it's one worth reading. I mean,
you had a lot less than usual. Oh yeah,
certainly,
definitely.
Self-Care for Men and Atomic Attraction. I was tearing them apart every.
Yeah, no, this.
But yeah, every chapter in this book is a net positive. Where with those two other books I mentioned, Self-Care for Men and Atomic Attraction, there were still some real jewels in both of them. But I would say I found more.
You had to dig.
Yeah,
had to dig a little.
Yes, exactly. All right. Thanks very much, Dan. I appreciated going through this. It was nice this was a refreshing book to do with you after the last one we did.
Yeah.
All right. Take it easy.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow. You made it through the whole thing. So you must like us at least a little bit, in which case you should definitely follow or subscribe to our show in your chosen podcast app. Thanks. We'll talk to you next time.